Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine Podcast Radio. You're about to listen to a new episode of Audio Signals. Get ready to take a journey into the known, the unknown, and everything in between. Recorded at no specific point in time nor space, ITSP Magazine's co-founders Marco Ciappelli and Sean Martin follow their passion and curiosity as they venture away from the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society to discover new stories worth being told. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
All right, everybody, this is Audio Signal Podcast with me, Marco Ciappelli. If you're watching the video, you see there is another person with me. It's Simon Chou. I hope that's how I should pronounce it. I should have asked you before I started, actually, about how to pronounce it. It's
always the number one mistake as podcasters.
I know, but when your first language is not English, you just say, "Oh yeah, sorry." That's why I get away with a murder. But anyway, how you pronounce it? Simon?
It's Chow, but I think that some people pronounce it Chew.
Okay.
I think both can work, but my family calls it Chow.
Chow. Okay, so it's Chow. So if somebody called you in the street, you're gonna turn either or. Like, it doesn't matter.
Either or.
Last name. All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
So this is a good way to start because, as people can probably understand and they know about me, I don't like to have plan. I don't like Q&A. When people ask me what are the questions on the podcast, I freak out because I really don't want to do that. I just want to have a cool conversation. And
that's me.
One thing that happened, exactly, that is very easy. It's when you have another person that does podcast. So it's kind of like, who's going to drive what. Like, are you going to be the one answering questions, or are you going to be the one asking questions? But I'm excited about this.
What?
Yeah, right?
I'm just hearing about it now.
Now, is this on this planet, or where is it from?
So my podcast is from the future. It's from a land far away. So it's funny. This is actually my second. I have two podcasts. My first podcast I started in 2020. Like most people, when COVID started, it was hard to connect with people. At the time I was a CEO of a job board, local job board in Canada, and they used to run a lot of events, with big companies. I'm just throwing out names: PayPal, Best Buy, IBM, Amazon. Big companies that used to post their jobs on our job board. And we have hundreds of thousands of job candidates. They used to do a lot of events to connect the two groups together. And when COVID happened, all of the events ended. We couldn't meet in person anymore. We tried doing some virtual meetings, but it just wasn't the same, right? So then I said, well, how can I still provide value to job seekers? How can I still get representation and branding from the companies virtually? And obviously, podcasting, it was growing at the time. It was easy enough. I just had to buy a mic. So I just started recording. And 80 episodes later, I decided to start my second podcast. That's the one that Marketing on Mars. That's the one where we talk about marketing with CEOs, CMOs, and founders. We can talk more about that later. And I did already 60 episodes of that. So in total, 140 episodes of podcasting. It's been crazy 3 years.
Does it feel like it? So many?
Oh man, it feels like forever ago, but also it feels like just yesterday. I still remember my very first episode and how freaking nervous I was. I planned every single line to say because I was so nervous, and then it just didn't feel real. So then after 40 episodes, I decided to say, you know what? No more scripts. And that's exactly why I really resonate with what you said. Now my podcasts have no scripts, nothing. We just have fun. And I think that's what podcasts are supposed to be.
I agree with you. And this is exactly for people that have been following me on Audio Signals. I already had a few conversations with podcasters, which happen to be people that have a show on ITSP Magazine. So I already know them. But I I just want to hear the why and the how, and sometimes get geeky if they want to with what microphone you're using and that kind of stuff, but mostly why you do it, right? And so I think with you, that you also have a background in marketing, we can have some fun with that as well. But again, no script. But I want to start with this fact that the first few episodes you thought it was going to be one way, and then it's like that's not me, right? I mean, I think some people like to follow the script. They like to be very structured. But I don't like to hear myself podcasts, for example, that are that structured. I want people having fun. I want to hear a real conversations. I don't know. Is that what you figured out? That's what you like?
Well, look at the best. Think about the top in any podcast. I'm going to talk about business podcasts because I'm in the world of business and marketing. Think about the top marketing and business podcasts out there. You got like The Hustle, which got sold to HubSpot for like $100 million or something like that. You got My First Millionaire. You got Digital Marketers podcast, and you got the All In podcast, which is right now the number one podcast in business. In the business, they get like 200 or 300,000 views on YouTube per episode, which is insane, right? And you listen to them, and none of them are scripted. It's just two friends or four friends, in the case of all in podcast, 2 or 4 friends just talking, totally unscripted, and they're just talking about business and marketing. And that's just so cool, and that's why people want to listen to it. Today, we literally hopped on 5 minutes before we clicked record. We said hi, we talked about we talked about the weather and everything, and then we started recording. And I think that's the genuine feeling. You can't fake real conversations. You just can't do that. And that's what I love about podcasting.
I love that. So one thing that I do quite a bit is, maybe because of my background as you in marketing and branding, mostly branding, and we could talk about the difference between the two if we want to, but personal branding, people often said, how should I represent my product? How should I represent myself? And I'm like, the easiest, honestly, is to be yourself. So I do the same thing now with podcasts. It's like, what should I talk about? And who should I try to be? I'm like, don't try to be anyone, because you're going to get bored with that. So I think people can read through the line and feel the passion, or both what you're passionate about and who you are really. So how long can you fake it? That's I guess, a good point.
Maybe you can fake it for you can technically fake it forever, right?
It's tough though. It's tiring.
You're not going to be able to build real relationships that way, because
it's true.
Imagine I'm faking who I am, Marco. You meet me for the first time and you think that I'm one way, and then we go out and grab a beer and I'm completely different. Well, what is that going to do for your experience with Simon? Who's the real Simon, and what does he want? If he's faking this so much on podcasts, he might be faking in other areas. Why would I want to do business with someone who's a fake?
Exactly. Yeah.
Just show up as yourself. My style is very casual, chill, relaxed. Even when I talk about very complicated topics on my show, on Marketing on Mars, I only interview CMOs, CEOs, and founders of companies with $30 to $300 million in revenue. So they're all very high-level marketers, very experienced marketers. We've had big companies like CMO, Stack Overflow come on our show. They're like a $2 billion company. And we talk about very complicated topics, but I like to tone things down in the formality. I'm very casual when I speak, but I understand all the different criteria, all the different areas, and all the, I know all the lingo and everything. But I like to dumb things down, because in my everyday life, in this remote world that we live in, I'm just myself all the time. I'm just me. I don't need to be a formal Simon in front of my colleagues who are halfway across the world. I can just be myself, and I would prefer to show up as myself at work rather than a more formal version of Simon. I'm just going to be Simon. whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home, whether I'm hanging out with my friends, just always just be myself. And I think that's so much easier to live life that way.
Yeah, it is easier. And I think people really love that, right? I mean, obviously, you watch a movie, there is an actor, that's his job, her job is to be someone else. But in this
Someone
case,
else.
you're learning something, you want to know who really these people are. Now, what I want to know is why the name Marketing on Mars? Because I like NASA, I like space, I like branding, I like marketing, podcasting, and I'm like, why are you having this podcast about marketing on Mars?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very good question. And I'm sorry to disappoint you. There's no
There's no reason.
there's no reason. I'm a big, I'm not paid to say this, but I'm a huge believer in like Tesla, SpaceX, and just the future of where we're going, like potentially exploration in space. Like I'm very bullish on that, and I think there's more to life than what we see right now. And so I've always been, I'm a stockholder for Tesla, and I just love everything that they're doing. Maybe that is the reason why it became Market on Mars. But also, space and everything it's a hot topic, right? It's a hot topic right now. So I honestly, and also the other thing is I wanted, as marketers, you always want double, I don't know what it's called, but when you have two letters back to back, Marketing and Mars, the two M's just look good. And then it turns out when you take all that, when you create an acronym for Marketing on Mars, it's MOM. MOM.
Yep.
It's MOM. It's the
that,
MOM podcast. So there's so many things, like it all just kind of came together literally. And then I'll tell you the kicker about it later. But after we came up with the name, then we found the hook afterwards. Everything came afterwards. It wasn't like this master plan that came together and that's why we grew. It was just like one thing after another. We just kept testing different things. Our team is really, really smart. I'm really happy with my team, and we're constantly testing different things. And yeah, there's no really smart, brilliant answer that I have for you.
But I like that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about marketing. Like you don't know how many times it's probably actually you've been asked that. I started my own advertising agency many years ago in Florence, Italy, where I'm from. And, at the beginning, this was pre-internet, really. The beginning of the internet, it was like 96, right? I mean, we still printed stuff
that was
for
a long
real.
time.
Right? I know, I'm old. So, but the point is, I will have people come into me and be like, I want a really cool logo, and I want a really cool name. It's like creative boutique. It's like, and I'm like, okay, like what? It's like, I want a cool logo like Nike. And I would ask, do you think it's a cool logo because it's actually a cool logo, objectively a cool logo, or is it a cool logo because it's a cool company and you associate?
Because it's Nike,
right? Yeah. So what comes first? I do like the idea, like I'm just gonna call it this. I like it, and then we will find the reason later. So I don't know. You talk marketing a lot. Do you have an opinion on these? Like, do we just build this fantastic brand like if it was all like scheduled from day one, perfectly made and thinking everything, or you just grow as an entity on his own?
Well, you said it in your question, which I really love. Is the Nike logo good because of Nike, or is Nike good because of the Nike logo? And I think the answer is it's because of Nike, because there's a new show that came out recently, and I don't know when you're going to release this episode, but it might be a little outdated by then. But there's a new show that talks about the growth of Nike. It's called Air, and it's a movie actually, and how Nike overcame Converse and Adidas. When Nike first came into the scene, they were not the biggest. Converse actually dominated the scene. They were like 60% market share. Nike, when they started, they were a much smaller company. They didn't have the huge market share that they have now today. So it wasn't like they were a household name right off the bat. And it's not like the person that designed the logo could foresee the entire, 100-year future of Nike. There's no way.
Right.
A logo is just a logo. It is what you make out of it. And obviously the logo is important because people recognize you for it. And the check is a brilliant logo. And don't get me wrong, it was an awesome logo. But even if you had a different logo, like Apple's logo was just an apple. And like people don't remember this probably, but like Apple wasn't always the biggest computer company in the world. Like they were competing against the likes of IBM and Microsoft, and it was like a battle and Dell was up there as well. But Apple kept innovating, and they just kept coming up with cool products, and that is what makes Apple's product the way it is. It's not really to do the logo. So yeah, I agree with you. Like if you're just starting out, don't worry. Don't spend 40 days or 50 days on a logo. Just throw a logo on. You can change it over time. Your logo might change over time as well, and it's okay. What's important is the value what is your product? What value are you creating and giving to other people? Or if it's not a product, if it's a service, same thing. What value is your service giving to other people? Is it saving people time, right? Is it helping people make more money? Is it saving people money? Like, what are you doing for other people? And think about that value, and that matters so much more than your logo.
I absolutely agree. The why behind the company, and if you if you actually walk in that talk, because if there is one thing nowadays that you can't really hide, and it goes back to, are you faking it or are you really being yourself, is the company. I mean, you can tell me who you are, but it's going to come out. I think actually Jeff Bezos says, your brand is what people say your company is when you're not in the room. I think it's pretty,
exactly.
pretty strong right there. So tell me
people
your
remembering
why.
you for.
Yeah. So tell me your why. So you said you started the podcast because of the pandemic and you thought it was a good idea, but what was the reason that inspired? Just to keep the relationship going, to reach a wider audience? I mean, what's your passion that is driving you to record 80, 100s episode one after another and don't get bored with it?
Yeah, so it changed over time. Like I said, I didn't have the logo. I didn't have this light bulb moment 3 years ago, and I foresaw my whole future for 4 years. The reason why I did my podcast in day one was very different from why I do podcasting in day 400, and it's very different from why I do podcasting now. So, very briefly, when I first started the podcast, episode 1, the reason was to connect with the employers that post their jobs on our job board and connect and give good advice to the job seekers. That was day 1. After 80 episodes, and when I paused the first podcast, I started Marketing on Mars. I think it was call it day 500, right, of my journey. Day 500, I've already had 80 episodes under the belt, and now COVID already ended, so we can all meet in person now. So there was my why has changed. My why at day 500 was more to connect with more founders and CEOs and CMOs so I can be a better leader myself. That was my why at that time. Because after 80 episodes, I met so many CEOs and so many founders and so many CMOs. I'm like, they're so smart. What if I can have a podcast where I just interview these people so I can be a better leader myself? That was my why. So that was day 500. Fast forward to today. Now we're on episode 60. We've recorded 60 episodes in 10 months. Now my why is a little bit different as well. My why is still to connect with CMOs, CEOs, and founders. But now now that I've learned so much about how to be a good CXO/founder, I want to now give back to the community. I want to connect people. So I use my podcast as kind of like a personal branding exercise. A lot of people are seeing on my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn gets about 10 or 12,000 impressions per post now, mostly because of my podcast. But because of that, I can connect with the community. So I have a community just to connect with other founders locally. I have a community just to connect with other HR people in tech locally. And I have a community just to connect with other tech professionals locally. And then I have a fourth a fourth community just to connect with LinkedIn content creators, because LinkedIn has been so good to me in my journey in the last 2 years that I want to give back to other people that are just starting and help them grow their LinkedIn profile as well. So my journey has changed a lot. Talk to me 3 years ago, I never even posted a single post on LinkedIn. I didn't have a community or anything. My purpose was very different, and your purpose will change over time. But it all started with one thing, which is I just always wanted to give value to people. The mission does change over time, but at the end of the day, like, provide value, like what you said, like, what are you doing for other people? And when you live life through that lens, it's just powerful. Like, life gives back to you like 20 times what you give to other people. It's like it's been like a huge growing journey, and it all started with podcasting for me. That's why I'm like a huge supporter of podcasts.
I love that. I agree with you with everything you said, and I think it's very humble and very smart when people say, look, I can be flexible. Like, I didn't foresee where I was going, but I'm ready to adapt. Like, especially with technology nowadays, I think like you have to. I mean, and you said this about the logo. Like, back in the days, people would tell you, no, you can't change. Your logo is forever. I mean,
Forever.
just to do a little change of shadow on, I don't know, a Coca-Cola logo, it would have been like,
how dare you?
Yeah, are you crazy?
How can you do that?
And spend a lot of money in market research just to change a tiny bit, and then they'll screw it up anyway. Like when they did actually change their logo, it was horrible. But that's reflect, I think, who you are, and being like, like we can make mistake, maybe we can grow, we can get better, we can do it better, and I think it's an important thing. So when you have this conversation with this CMO founders and people, I guess investors as well, do you say you learn from them, you become a better founder yourself? Anyone that really made a big difference in your life? I mean, you don't need to tell me the name. You don't need to throw a name, but like, was like some really big revelation? They're like, damn it, I never really thought that way. Maybe
so
in
many.
the industry. Yeah.
It's so many. Like, honestly, I learned a little bit from everybody. And like, even when you read books, right? When you read the book the first time, you learn something. You read the same book 2 years later, you learn something completely different. It feels like a completely different book. So I've interviewed 60, probably over 80 now, over 80 CEOs and CMOs and founders across two of my podcasts. And
are they in a specific
every
industry?
single one is different. Yeah.
Are they in a specific industry? I mean, are you focusing on, I don't know, tech, or are they from different walk of life and different products / services? I'm just curious to know that.
Yeah, all over the place.
Okay.
I've interviewed people from, like, I interviewed one of the largest manufacturing companies, like manufacturing equipment companies in Canada. I think they do about, oh my God, I'm going to butcher this, like over $1 billion in revenue per year. And they're publicly traded. They're a huge company. I interviewed the CEO of that company. So that's like manufacturing. And then go all the way to Stack Overflow, which is a fully tech remote workforce. And 50% of developers use, more than 50%, like something like 60% of all developers use Stack Overflow every single day. It's like the Google or Reddit for developers. So like all the way from, like, we had Alo Yoga on the show, and they sell yoga apparel. And then we have Aventon, one of the largest e-bike manufacturers and sellers in the US. They do $300 million per year in revenue. The CMO came on our show, and the list goes on. Like, every single time I talk to someone, I learn something different, but also the same. But when you learn it,
all right, yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah.
So let's go there. Is there like a thread, like a line that kind of make you think like, wow, okay, every successful founder has, I don't know, this vision or this way of thinking of, I mean, a common thread
Yes.
that you found. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. What I found in common with all these 80 CXOs and founders that I've met, they're all very, how do I say this? They're all they're flexible. Like, maybe not at the onset, but they're always open to change and they're always learning. At least the most successful ones, right? And I'm not saying that I'm interviewing only successful people. That's not what I'm like. That's not what I'm saying. They're in the beginning. I interviewed a lot of companies that were, $0 to $10 million. Maybe $1 to $10 million, like smaller companies. But now, as the podcast grew, bigger companies wanted to come on the show, and so I need to support these, like at least the most successful people that I've interviewed on the show. Yeah, all very flexible and open to change, and just like constantly adapting, and then like just learning. They're always learning. I just interviewed a CMO of a company. Not going to name any names or company, but the company is huge. One of the largest providers for like security, like online security. They do $300 million per year in revenue, and I interviewed the CMO.
You can throw the name, I don't care.
Yeah. The company is Ping Identity.
Yeah, I know them.
So spoke with their CMO, and he says he only goes to 2 conferences per year, 1 if he's lucky, and he will only go to a conference if he can learn something, because he's still wanting to learn. And this is a guy that's like super experienced and been around and has just like, he's so experienced in marketing and sales, and he's still wanting to learn, which is incredible, so humbling, and it makes me think about my life in a different lens. I've always known this already. Like, I've always known this. I have a mentor that tells me, as soon as you think you know everything, that's when you know nothing. And when I talk to all these people and they humble me every single time, and I live my life so differently now versus 3 years ago when I just first started my podcast journey, because I just know that there's a million things for me to learn.
I love that. I can see myself into that too, although I'm older than you, but every time I talk to someone, I just learn. I mean, even if I throw my opinion, it doesn't matter. You never know enough, right, about anything. And I like to think everything from a philosophical perspective, which is always make you doubt everything that you actually know. So I think when you brought the example of the mentor that told you that, you just learn that you don't know enough. That's very Confucius to think about in that term, right? So learning.
Yeah, and like, for example, you've been doing ITSP magazine for like 7
years,
almost 8 years now. Podcasting, media, different channels have changed a lot in the last 8 years, and you're just constantly evolving, right? Like, absolutely. TikTok didn't exist 8 years ago. I mean, it did, but it wasn't so big. And like Instagram was the biggest thing, and now it kind of went downhill a little bit. Facebook was the #1 platform, and now it's like nowhere to be seen. Snapchat came and disappeared. Like, it's just constantly changing and evolving.
MySpace. You don't even remember MySpace, bro.
Bro, I don't. I don't remember MySpace.
That's another age. That's completely different age. That's pre-story, pre-Facebook, pre-story. No, I think it's this changes again. I mean, I can see like the thread, the common thread of our conversation. I think everything comes back to change. We started with the logo, with you changing the why, 500 hours or days or 200 days. And now we're still talking about change and be humble, being flexible. I think that's the key. I think it's a good way to be when you do this job. Because if you're interviewing people, what are you going to go there and just show off that you already know all that shit? Because that's not going to go well with your audience, right?
I don't think it's good. Like I went to an event. I went to several events recently, and you probably go to events as well. And like there's always these guest panels, like expert people that talk in front of an audience. And I'm just like, man, if I wanted to listen to someone speak, I would have just been on YouTube. I would just go on YouTube and I can listen to really like the best in the world like talk, and I can pause it if I want to cook some instant noodles, or I can pause it and go pick up some mail, or I can pause it and go use the washroom. But in an in-person guest panel, I cannot pause. There's no pause button, and I gotta sit and listen to an hour when there's so many people in the room to meet, right? You go to events to meet people, and that's actually the reason why I started doing my community events and started doing a lot of networking stuff. I don't know if you've seen my LinkedIn.
Yeah, actually, I did. I was going to ask you about that. Like, there is the global stage, which is the YouTube, the LinkedIn. I mean, your connection all over the world. But then there is the community, which I was going to ask you how important it is for you to be out there with everybody in the world that can see you and listen to you, but also still this need to get that local event going at the bar and be, 25 people and really connect one-on-one. Like how important is that for you?
Yeah, well, look, I do both, right? Like I do my virtual events. I meet with LinkedIn content creators once a month. Last Tuesday of each month we meet. Last one we had about 23 people show up, and this one we already have 49 people on the guest list. So it's gonna be about 40 people all around the world that create content on LinkedIn. We're just gonna meet and just talk about your business, your biggest challenges, and why you do what you do, kind of like what you did with this podcast, right? Episode. But you're right, the in-person stuff, you can't replace it. The in-person stuff is like it brings me so much joy. I started my very first, actually it was because of my podcast. Look, everything comes back to my podcast. I interviewed about 20 founders locally, this new podcast, Marketing on Mars. And then I just messaged about 6 of them. And I said, hey, do you guys want to grab a beer? Because this was like 2022. COVID kind of officially ended and everyone is going back to their normal life. So I'm like, let's grab a beer. 6 of us grabbed the beer and it was super fun. We talked about so many different topics. And then we just had this idea like, wait, 2 founders, 2 founders, 2 founders. Why don't everyone grab like a couple of founders and let's do another one next week. We did another one. 12 founders came out. And then from 12 founders it grew to 20. 20 grew to 30. And just last Thursday, we did one with 35 founders in a room. And just like no guest panels, no keynotes, no sponsors, just founders. You pay for your own drinks, you pay for your own food, and just founders meeting other founders. And like the best conversations. And I make sure to, and I cut it in a way where every single founder gets at least 5 to 8 different conversations with other founders. And I can tell you more of the details later, but and then from that, I'm like, why do I limit myself just with founders? What about all these job candidates that I have access to on BC Jobs? They want to connect with other people and learn how to become a better job candidate. So I did a job candidate happy hour on Tuesday, and about 70 people came out to that. And then just yesterday, we did a HR happy hour, and about 110 people came to that happy hour. And so like the communities are growing, and my whole thing is, as a host, I need to make the event not about me. I just bring the people together and I have to get the hell out of the way. I'm not going to speak for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'm going to force you to have to listen to me. If you want to learn about me, you can go on my LinkedIn. And my LinkedIn, you can learn everything about me that you have to, almost. But I just want to bring people in a room and just let them talk, mix and mingle. Hear this person, you meet this person, and just allow people to really connect.
That's really cool. And I think you need to be some kind of a born connector even to have podcasts, because you can't be too reserved. You need to like to talk to people, and more often than others. I mean, I like to organize panels where we talk about a topic. Usually, it's people that I have interviewed or I've been on their show. Or I mean, it is, yeah, it's not real life. But again, I'm not sure supported that digital life is real life. It's different.
It is real.
But it's real.
It's real.
I mean, big time.
It's real.
It's totally real.
Very real.
I went for the first time back to an event, and it's probably one of those that the CMO you talk about Ping Identity was RSA Conference San Francisco. It was 3 weeks ago, and I finally made it back. We were media partner, and it was amazing to finally be back with the community, even if it's people I maybe interview 3 days before. But there is that feeling. But honestly, I felt like I already knew them, even if I never met them. But after I talked to you for 40 minutes, I mean, there is a connection. It may not be a fist bump,
sure.
It may be a beer, but I mean, we got to talk as
I mean, we can.
are.
I have a few beers in my fridge. We can definitely still
I have
grab
water.
a beer.
I have a sparkly water, but it looks like a beer. No, listen, I want to ask you the last question, which is what's going to be your next change? Like you say in your next why, your next change. I mean, do you have maybe other conversation that you want to start tackling, other topics that you're passionate about, and maybe you'll just start another podcast? I don't know. Anything in your radar that kind of inspire you now?
My next thing, and I haven't really talked about this publicly too much. I've just been thinking about it a lot. It's just like I do a lot virtually with my CMOs and founders all over North America, and we build good relationships virtually on my podcast. But I would love to do bring everyone together on my podcast in person one day. It would be my dream, and I don't know how I would do it, where it would be, because they're all over the world. We have C-suites and founders in New York, California, San Francisco, Nashville, Phoenix, just all over US and even Canada, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. Where are we going to bring everyone? Are we bringing everyone to Mexico, or bring everyone to Napa Valley? Like, I don't know. I don't know where we're going to bring everyone, but if I can do that in the next 12 months, it would just be a dream for me, because I've interviewed everyone, I've spoken with everyone. Everyone's doing such cool things. It would be cool to bring everyone in a room where they can connect and chat. But that will be some whiles away, because I've never done that yet.
All right. Yeah. Well, if you can do it, I think will be pretty big, because it's very hard. It sounds like a conference that is not really a conference, but it's just a get together. I'm going to suggest the metaverse. I'm going to suggest the metaverse, but it's probably not going to.
I know.
I know. I'm just kidding. I know. It would defeat the purpose, right? And I know, but it's not.
But there's so many. There's so many already out there, and if I do that, it'll just be another. Hey, me too. And my whole thing is connecting people with other people. So if it's not going to work out, then it's not going to work out. But if there's a lot of interest, then I would love to do it. But we'll have to see.
Maybe on Mars.
Maybe on Mars. Take us, Elon, if you're listening to this.
Well, first you got to put the big rocket up for real, but it's working on it. Listen, Simon, I really was looking forward for this. I know that I had to reschedule with you from last week. This is going to go live relatively soon. I mean, published relatively soon. And it was a pleasure. I wish you the best of luck for anything you do. I mean, I really enjoyed to have this honest conversation, completely unscripted. Again, nothing.
Literally, we had no idea. We had no idea what we were going to talk about.
And yet, I really hope that our audience got to listen to it, to spend a good 38 minutes, having a good time, maybe learning something, having some questions in their head. That's what I feel like it's successful. If you have more questions now than when you started listening to this, we did something good. So Audio Signal Podcast, subscribe, share, and of course, connect with Simon. There'll be a link in the note to your podcast, to your LinkedIn profile, and hopefully you will make this big meeting somewhere in the world or in the solar system become reality. So thank you, Simon, very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Audio Signals. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society, and some even beyond that.